So today we're mostly going to be focusing on postcards, even though we do need to make a billboard this week as well. And the reason why I'm choosing to focus in the live session on the postcards is I feel that in the discussion post, we're really focusing on the billboards. So we know that billboards are a very large board. They're usually by the roadside or attached to a building, and they're used for displaying advertising. They can also be called an outdoor board. Then we have postcards, which are direct mail advertising pieces that are sent to consumers via the mail. I'm sure you have all received a postcard in your time, even postcards from friends, that you would buy on vacation. I don't feel like people do that anymore, which is kind of a bummer. I used to love getting postcards, like whenever my family or my friends went somewhere exotic, they would, or even just down to Florida or something, they would send me a postcard, and people don't really do that anymore. It's kind of a bummer. Postcards are mainly for advertising these days. Then other types of advertisements can be magazine ads, newspaper ads, or even business cards. So I want to go over some postcard examples. And you'll notice some of these postcards are different sizes. The size of the postcard that we will be making this week is a 5x7, and I really hope I got that right, which is more along the lines of this size, kind of your standard rectangle. This is really in kind of a oversized postcard, but I think it's still a great design. So let's look at these examples. I'm going to go through the slides before I start talking about each example, but I really want you to take note. I'll probably stay on each slide for about 10 seconds. And if you're watching at home, just jot down what you notice first about these designs, like what stands out to you. And then we'll discuss it, why it is that they were designed this way. So we'll start with this one. And I'm not gonna talk about them yet. Okay, so one of the first things that I noticed is there is one main image on the postcard. It's not a whole bunch of small images. It's not like a colored background. It's like there's, the background is really one image that completely bleeds right to the edges of the postcard. Then a lot of them have, one headline. Some of them have a logo on the front. Some of them, don't. And they might have the logo, set up like this on the back. So when you flip the card over, even with this one, there's one large image and then you have like a banner with the information in it. Even the background's kind of like one large image, and then you flip it over to find out what's going on. Again, the one large image with the banner, and then the banner continues on the back with the information. Big image, big image. This one's multiple images, but they all come together and feel like a big image. One big image, headline. And then a pattern background and what looks to be, I don't know if this is actually a logo or if it's just like an image that they've made to kind of signify what's going on with this card. Then we have one large image and one large image over a patterned background. So pretty cool. Like there's a lot of cool and different examples in these postcards. So these are the things that I want you to think about. You know, a postcard in a way is kind of like a billboard. When you're going through your mail, you're probably going to flip through it. And if the postcard catches your eye, you'll take the time to check out what is being advertised. But if the message is not immediately clear, it's a good thing that it's a good chance, it's not a good thing, but it's a good chance that it might end up in your recycling bin. And you may never take the time to kind of read what is going on with that postcard. So these are the things that you want to think about when you are creating your postcards. You definitely want, you know, a central image, you know, nice and big, nice and crisp and clean image. Not a lot of text, probably just your headline and your logo. So you're going to have to come up with, you know, a good headline that goes along with your city that encompasses what it is that you want to promote. You know, you're trying to bring tourists into your city. So this is something to think about when you're doing your research. All right. Now, with that being said, we need to match, you know, our logos are type-based, which means that there aren't images in our logo, but our fonts that we're choosing for our advertisements really need to match the feel of our logo. They shouldn't necessarily be the same font as our logo because you really want your logo to stand out. So I wanted to talk a bit about typography today because I feel like, you know, typography is one of those subtleties that some people get right away and some people have a little bit of a difficulty with it, you know, picking fonts and understanding why certain fonts work together, why certain fonts are well drawn. When I first started graphic design, I really didn't get it. I'm not going to lie. I completely, you know, gravitated towards very kind of artsy fonts that weren't necessarily easy to read. And I had a great typography teacher when I was probably like 18 or 19 years old. And he actually drew a couple of fonts. So he went over why a font is well designed with us. And it had to do with how the font was drawn, how each of the letters interacted with each other. And he kind of gave us the science behind typography. And it was so interesting to see that from this, you know, he was really old, like he was in his like 70s or 80s, and he just, you know, he did it the old school way. He hand drew the letters and then he would bring them and have them scanned in. And this was back in the late 90s, but you know, he really took the time to think through and graph each letter on graph paper and think about how that letter was going to interact with all of the different letters within that font family. And it was amazing just how much work went into designing each and every letter. That I think, you know, there's a reason why some fonts are well drawn because the time was taken and some fonts are not. So typography is the art and technique of arranging type to make written language legible, readable, and appealing. That's a big one when displayed. The arrangement of type involves selecting typefaces, point size, the line length, the line spacing, which is the leading, the letter spacing, which is the tracking, and adjusting the space within the letter pairs, which is known as the kerning. It is central to graphic design, and this is so true. It is one of the fundamental parts of a designer's education. It's what sets designers apart from other artists such as painters, illustrators, and photographers. You know, an illustrator, they may draw the most wonderful drawings. That does not mean that they are good at choosing fonts. Same thing goes for painters, and same thing goes for photographers. You know, graphic designers, this is what sets us apart. It's what sets us apart from even web designers when you think about it. You know, we understand typography and we understand how to use typography well. So let's talk about some tips, because, you know, when you first start off, it can be, there's so many fonts out there, it can be so overwhelming. So how do you figure this out? You know, just before I get into this, into the, you know, what the rule books say on the typography tips and tricks, you know what? Find a well-drawn font, you know, stick with some of the classics, you know, Helvetica, Gill Sans, Futura. Those are well-known classic fonts that are very well drawn. There's a reason why designers tend to gravitate towards them. So try to use them and understand how they are best used. And those are actually versions of sans serif fonts. So they're the little fonts without the feet. Sans is without, so, and serif is like the bottoms that look like little feet. So without feet. That's how I remember which one is which. And then you have your serif fonts, which Times New Roman is one, but we don't really use Times New Roman too much. A better drawn font might be Bodoni. Adobe Garamond is a well-drawn serif font. Utopia is a well-drawn serif font. It's actually really well known for its readability. I worked for a newspaper that had changed their entire font of their newspaper to Utopia back in the 90s because it was easier to read. Studies were shown and it was easier to read. So you want to look at the ones that are well-drawn, use those, understand why those work, and then try to branch out from there. So back to, those are my tricks for what has worked for me. So back to our typography tips. It is difficult to read typefaces whose strokes are extreme, so either too light or too heavy. Those typefaces with too much thick, thin contrast may be difficult to read when they are set very small, as the thin strokes may seem to disappear. So you need to really think out the size of the font and what it's going to be used for. So that's why when you were creating those mood boards, you really wanted to look for a font face that would work well with a headline, one that might work well with a subheadline, and one that might work well as your body copy. Expanded or condensed typefaces are more difficult to read due to the distortion. Body copy that is set in all caps is a huge no-no. It is so hard to read. So never set your body copy in all caps. Also, don't set your body copy in bold. Don't set your body copy in italic. Don't set all of your body copy in outlines. Those are just some good tips. You know, the simpler the font for your body copy, the easier it is going to be on the eyes to read. Value contrast between type and ground increases readability, so you want to have that contrast there. It's more difficult to read highly saturated colors, especially when positioned on other highly saturated colors. So think of a red font over a bright green background, extremely difficult to read. Type over imagery is hard to read, especially small white type on a dark background, and it's especially hard to read on the screen. And also, people tend to read darker colors first because they notice it first. So I just want to change this. All right, just to give you an idea on readability. I think that this is a really good font. When I'm putting together my slideshows, there's a reason why I picked this font. Is it's very easy to read. It has a great readability on the screen. But what if I changed my body copy in this font to something even like this? That makes it so much harder, doesn't it? Or what if I changed it to something like this? I mean, sure, it looks kind of cool, but which one was way more difficult, or way easier, actually, way more difficult? Yeah, which one's way more difficult? Because that's what you want. Which one was easier to read? Obviously, this font right here, way easier to read. So, you know, that's what I mean about like thinking where your body copy is going to be used. Here's a good example. Like, obviously, you know, when it's presented to you in the present form, it's easier for you to read, especially when you're watching the video or you're watching live on your screen. And that's because it's the full screen. But to find out if your font is going to work, you know what, change that typeface to even something like this. Get up and step back from your screen. And if you can't make out those letters at the same distance that you could make out these letters, you know it's too difficult and people are just going to end up moving on. So those are the things that I just kind of wanted to point out. You know, ways to tell if something has readability or not. You know, if you're a little bit concerned, get up and walk away from the screen, or have somebody else come over and look, but tell them that they only have 5 seconds to see what's on the screen. And if they can't kind of glance over what it is that you have written because it was too hard to read, that there's your answer. So, you know, just like I said, just a couple of tips and tricks to figure that out, you know, especially having somebody else look. You know, sometimes we need a fresh set of eyes when we've been sitting there staring at the same thing for 2 days, you know, it's helpful to get a fresh set of eyes. All right, so 8 rules for creating effective typography. And this goes back to what I was saying before. Number 1, learn the basics. Your first steps toward more effective typography is to learn a bit about the art of typography. The anatomy of a typeface involves very specific jargon, precise measurements, and general standards that must be known and respected. As with many forms of design, you can only get away with breaking a rule if you know that rule very well and are doing it intentionally to make a statement. So this is the anatomy of a typeface. You have the counter, which is the inside right here. You have the bowl, which is the swoop. You have the spine, the ascender, which this is your midline. Anything above the midline is an ascender. This is your baseline. Anything below that baseline is a descender. Here's your little feet that I was talking about. Those are your serifs. This little bulb right here, that's your terminal. This is the stem. And then a ligature is when 2 letters connect, like an FF, or some of them are an FL, and there's another ligature I can't think of. And there's specific keys on the Mac to make ligatures, and I haven't done it in a while, but you can look up ligatures and it'll give you all of the information on them. And I used to, back when I went to graphic design school, I would forget to do my ligatures and they would be circled on my presentation and sent back to me every single time to fix. So, you know, if you're going to do it right. Next, you want to watch your kerning. So kerning involves adjusting the spacing between 2 letters in a given font. Note that this is a separate issue than tracking, which adjusts the space between all of the letters at the same time. So you kern by moving 1 letter at a time, and you track by selecting the entire word and like changing it to like -10, basically, and it'll squish everything. So you might think that an expensive program like Adobe Illustrator or Adobe InDesign would automatically solve all of your kerning woes for you, and that this is therefore not a problem that will arise in your artwork. Well, think again. Seriously, at some point Adobe needs to like figure this out and have at least something. And I'm really surprised that they haven't, but they haven't. So if you're not used to looking for kerning issues, the problems may be subtle in this word, but they're definitely there. And at this point, I've been doing this for so long that when I see something like this, I'm like, oh, and it drives me bananas. So you'll notice how the uppercase D in the example above stands out significantly from the rest of the word. That's not on purpose. By default, many typefaces, especially those with pronounced serifs or the feet, can possess inconsistent letter spacing. So those are your Times New Roman, your anything with the feet, your Bodoni, your Garamond, those type of fonts. This is usually not a huge problem when you're looking at an entire paragraph of text or even a sentence of text, as the inconsistent spacing will sort of blend out because the copy will start to look like a block of words. However, when you're dealing with only a few words, such as your headline or your logo, sloppy kerning issues can destroy the entire aesthetic. So what you would need to do is you would need to move this E over, probably to right, just a smidge, just to right about here. This spacing is okay. This spacing is nice. But then again, you'll notice there seems to be a big gap here. Move that U over, probably so it's just starting to overlay. The top of the U right here comes a little bit closer to the A here, and it will create a great, beautiful line, like a little circle there. This is good, because you don't want your feet to touch. And then the same thing happens with the T. There's a lot of visual space right here, so you probably want to bring the T over right about to here. And I can do an example of that because I know this is a little bit hard to understand. So let me do an example of that, and I'll show you how it defaults. I think that they chose a great word. How it defaults versus how it really should look. So let me grab a good font. Garamond regular. There we go. So let me see. I might have actually I think they were using Garamond. It looks the same. You can usually tell by the A in Garamond. It's got the same bowl. All right. So what I will do is I'm going to grab the letter D right here. And up here, I'm just going to start to bump it back until I can bump that E over. I might even bump the F over just a little bit. And you want to grab, if you want to move the U over, let's say, like the U closer to the A, you need to select the A. So that's where it gets a little bit confusing when you're first trying to figure this out. And that's good. So, when we sit back, the spacing just feels better in this than it feels like this. It's the subtle things, but it really affects your design. So these are the things, and again, I think, Garamond's a very beautifully drawn font, and, just the little things in Garamond. Let's compare Garamond, because we were talking before about, picking a font. Let's compare it to just regular Times New Roman. See how, kind of bulbous the Times New Roman is here? Like the F is just so much better drawn than the F, which is just a plain old bar here. The A, just the subtlety in the way the A is drawn is just so much better than the A here. Times New Roman was originally just like a typewriter font, that got transformed into a computer font because nobody uses typewriters anymore. But it wasn't. It was built for functionality. It wasn't built for beauty, basically. So the same thing can be said for what is it default to on this machine? I think it's like Minion Pro. Again, not that well drawn. Garamond, much more beautifully drawn than Minion Pro. So just, when you're picking a font, try to pick a well-drawn font. I don't know if I don't have Utopia on this machine, because I was giving that as an example. Let me see if I can pull up another. Perpetua is a nicely drawn font too. Again, just a little subtleties in the font. And the same can be said for, some of your script fonts. I'm not a big fan of brush script. I don't think that it's a very well-drawn script font. I think that there are better script fonts. So, a better script font may be this Adorn's Pomodere, just like, although I'm not a huge fan of that D, but the rest of this is much better drawn. Alex Brush, that one's not bad. Allura, this is a good script font. So you can see, when you're trying to pick a script font, like this is easier to read, and it just has a different, such a different flair about it than brush script. So, try to break outside of the norm of the five font, the couple of fonts that you just know. And again, that's where using that font squirrel comes into play. And I posted a link to that. And, you just want to, expand your horizons when it comes to fonts. All right. Also, this is a very, very important one, and I love this graphic that goes along with it. Be aware of font communication. So font selection should never be an arbitrary process. You should you should definitely think about what it is that those words are saying when you're picking a font. Simply looking through your entire library to find a font that you like will rarely produce an effective result. It doesn't matter that you really like it and you think it's cool. You need to think about why, what the functionality is of that type of a font and what you're going to be using it for. The reason is there is an inherent psychology associated with certain types of fonts. If you're perceptive, these font selections will seem very poor to you. I can't even talk today. These font selections will seem very poor. Let's look at what this says right here. Wrestling match in a very scripty font that I would probably expect to see for wedding day. Formal dinner in a very informal font. Hair salon in an old English font. I hope I don't leave in a white wig. You really need to think about why you're choosing a font. The reason why the selection is poor is there's a major disconnect between the visual personality of the font selection and the words written within them. We have become accustomed to seeing different types of fonts used for different purposes, and I can guarantee you a professional designer should not be using any of those fonts for the purpose that is listed there. Number 4, alignment. So alignment is extremely important when we are discussing typography. For some reason, non-designers tend to instinctively center align everything. Somewhere in life we learned that if something is centered, then it is balanced and therefore works better. However, in reality, center alignment is actually the weakest and hardest to read alignment, and it should be used very selectively. So you'll notice this is body copy here, which means not headlines, not subheadlines, but actual body copy text, paragraphs of text. You can read this far better when it is left aligned with a nice rag like this than even left aligned like this. Although this one's not that bad, but when it gets to be center aligned, it's just difficult to read because your eyes, can't follow it correctly. So you really want a nice left align with a nice rag to it. And what I mean by that is there is a similar length, except for the last line, obviously, to each of the lines. So I didn't, hit enter here, and then this line goes to here, and then this line only goes to here, and then this line goes to here. That would be difficult to read as well. Number 5, choosing a good secondary font. So now that you figured out, all right, I know what my headline font is going to be. I have my logo. but I need a font for body copy or a subtag to go along with it, how on earth am I going to choose that secondary font? Well, number one, you want to limit the number of fonts that you have going on your page. So if you've already got a logo, what I would say is, your subtag should probably be extremely similar to the feel of your headline, maybe just a thinner version of it, and the body copy should be the same. So after you've chosen a primary typeface, the next step is to choose another font that will accent it. This is as opposed to a font that will conflict with your primary choice. There are several problems in the first example in this image. First, the types of fonts chosen are very poor. The supporting font is more ornate and it's harder to read than the primary font. This ends up detracting from the primary font, and that should always be avoided because, this is the main information, this is the sub information. I don't want this to detract from my main information. Also, even if the first problem weren't an issue, the two fonts are too similar in thickness to be used together. So even though they are drastically different in style, their similar stroke weight doesn't provide enough visual contrast between the two fonts. The second example uses more appropriately contrasting fonts and utilizes a thinner, simpler font for the subtag. And you can see this just feels better. I mean, like visually. And to my OCD, it feels better. I have font OCD. I'm not going to lie. One of the hardest things is choosing a font, but I have such a great feeling when I choose two great fonts and they work well together on the page. It's like such a feeling of satisfaction when it's done. So I am definitely a nerd designer at heart. Number 6, size matters. So headlines should grab the reader instantly. You have a second or two at best to get someone's attention in the print world. If you miss that opportunity, you've definitely missed a potential customer. So what this means practically is that when you're creating a headline, don't simply type it out, but design it. So these are both the same exact ad copy. One obviously stands out to you far more than the other. You could win a trip for 4 to the Bahamas. And what do I see right off the bat? Win the Bahamas. I want to go to the Bahamas. Right here, I have to read the whole line before I understand what it is that's going on. And I'm like, oh, I can win a trip for the Bahamas. This one, I can win the Bahamas. I see it instantly. So you want to design that. We've got, this is all technically the same exact font. It's just a difference in size and caps for the important information. So, don't just type out your headline. Design it. You're designers. Number 7, use typography as art. That's what we did when we were creating our logos. Stop thinking of typography as simply headlines and body copy and start thinking of it as a design element. The typefaces are meticulously designed and therefore possess an aesthetic that can be a valuable asset to your design arsenal. This, of course, goes well beyond building faces with letters, such as this one. If you want to create a typography-centric design, think about how you can incorporate attractive type as the hero of your design. Remember, we were discussing what's the hero of your design yesterday? Is it the image or is it the text? Well, what if your text becomes the image and it becomes the hero all on its own? So, little things to think about. Number 8, find good inspiration. The best way to learn to create effective and attractive typography is to find and study some great examples. Good and bad typography examples are close. I can't speak. Good and bad typography examples are as close as the nearest fast food joint, that is for sure. Keep a lookout everywhere you go for what others are doing and think about why it does or why it doesn't seem to work well. Because, and it depends. A lot of times there's some really good typography in magazine layouts, maybe not so great typography in the layout of your market circular that you have at the grocery store, so Good and bad is out there. Maybe somebody who put a flyer on your car while you were in the supermarket did not have a good design sense, and they touched your car, which always drives me bananas. All right, so we do have some common mistakes that we want to avoid in typography. Number one, text too close to the edge of the page. You want to give yourself, I'll always say this, things need more breathing room. You need some breathing room, amongst the elements on your page. Give things their space, and that means not running it, unless if it's a design element to do it that way, not running it right to the edge of your page. If the text is too close to other items, graphics or pictures, again, breathing room. If the text is unreadable over the background, so dark text on a dark background, there's no contrast. Same thing, light text over a light background, no contrast. Or text over a multicolored background, just hard to read. If your body copy is all caps, very bad idea, very difficult to read. Don't pick a font that's all caps. If you have too much use of a handwritten font, handwritten fonts have their place. It's never in body copy. Inconsistent spacing after paragraphs, if things are kind of running into each other or the spacing just isn't consistent amongst all of the different paragraphs, it can become distracting. If you use too many effects on the text, so blur, shading, blends, bevels, embosses, shadows, gradient fills, etc., etc., etc. If you're going to choose, I had a friend, him and I used to do a lot of design together. He owned his own company. And we both had the same principle, but it was really, he was the one who said it first, so I'm not going to take credit for it. He used to say, if you're going to use an effect, you can use one, so choose wisely. Which one do you want? Do you want a drop shadow? Because that's all you're getting. Do you want an outline? Because that's all you're getting. Do you want to bevel it? Well, you're not embossing it. You can choose one. And if you couldn't choose one, then don't put the effect. And it was so true. Keep it simple. You really don't need all of, just because all the buttons are there doesn't mean that you need to press them. Outlined body text, very difficult to read. Or the body text is too large or too bolded. All right. Now, this is one that some people have some difficulty with, and it's visual hierarchy. And, you'll probably hear me discuss that, when I send things back, what's the hierarchy of the information on this page? What should be seen first? What should be seen next? Then what? So that's how you want to think about visual hierarchy. Since people do not spend much more than a few seconds glancing at an ad, and it's true, we spend hours and hours putting this stuff together, and people will glance at it, if they even do, for a few seconds. So you really need to have that hierarchy. The principle of visual hierarchy creates order and coherence, facilitates rapid message communication. Visual hierarchy is the arrangement of all graphic elements according to emphasis, and it is employed to guide the viewer. That's what you're doing. You're purposely making the viewer move their eyes about the page in the way you want them to do it. So you are the master of how their eye is going to look at your ad. That's what the purpose of visual hierarchy is. So emphasis is the arrangement of visual elements according to importance, stressing some elements over others and making some graphic elements dominant and others their subordinate. So what do you want the viewer to see first? What do you want them to see second? What do you want them to see third? And in all honesty, after you get to third, their eye is going to do what it's going to do. But you'll notice it in this example here. Your eyes are here, then they're here, then they're here. Isn't that fascinating? And you all did it. Nobody started right here. This designer has basically made you look at their ad in the exact order that they want you to look at it. Boom, boom, boom. All with typography and using visual hierarchy. So there are some basics of hierarchy in design. In typography, headlines should be the biggest and the boldest. Subheaders can be bigger than body text or bolder than body text, but they need to be smaller than the headlines. Your body text should be the smallest with little to no effects of bolding or italics. If you need to just call out one or two words, clearly you can bold it or make it italic. But the entire paragraph should not be bold or italics. Visually, you need to design so the viewer can visually see the most important part of the design, the call to action, the images, the headline, etc. The rest of the page should lead the eye through the design using a grid, colors, typography, so the viewer can easily read the page while being visually stimulated. And you can see there is a grid to this page. We have the headline. We can read the body copy. Some parts of the body copy, are bolded at the top, to call out some emphasis. We've got some subheadlines. They're definitely not just distracting from the main headline. And everything is laid out nice and neat on the page. All right. So it is about 12:50 my time. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and then we will get into the assignment and the assessment for this week. We'll build those billboards, and we will build that postcard. And if we have time, we will come back to our slideshow. And if not, I will post it for you to read. Let's take a look at those assignments for this week. This week, last week you had to work on the assessment before we worked on the assignment, and the same isn't for this week. You can work on the assignment first. So that's what I'm going to navigate over to. So let's first discuss the assignment. And again, please make sure you're reading over all of the instructions in the assignment, that you're reading over the rubric to make sure that you have everything that you need to have. So last week, you began to develop the idea for your logo. This week, consider the feedback from your instructor, that's me, and you want to finalize one logo from your week 1 submission because you're only using one logo. Then use your logo in an appropriate advertising theme, and you're going to create 3 billboards. So you want to create the ad in either Illustrator or Photoshop. For the final presentation, we're going to mock it up onto a photo so it looks real and it has some context, but you don't need to worry about that this week. So here are some examples of some large-scale ads. So I'm going to open these up for you. So obviously not the size that we're making it, but a big billboard for Countryside is Great Britain. Then we have some Clear Channel outdoor. They almost own all of the billboards, seriously. But here are some examples of theirs. And then we have some travel and tourism billboards, which, let's see if I can pull this one up. It brings you back here. I was hoping it would pull up a big picture, but you can kind of see. Sometimes Pinterest is great and sometimes it doesn't work exactly how you want it to work. All right, so you want to think through what it is that we have learned in the reading from the discussion post this week when it comes to billboards. And I'm going to pull up the discussion again so we can go over that, because it's actually like really important. I'm going to pull up that link. The 6 rules of billboard advertising. Number 1, start here. 6 words or less is ideal. I will be counting your words on your billboard, so don't write 10,000 things on your billboard. 6 words or less. People are driving by at 65 miles an hour if they're actually doing the speed limit when they are reading these. Get noticed, but don't be a huge distraction. Not a place for a direct response, so not a place for a call to action. Be smart, but not too clever. The more billboards, the better. That doesn't really matter. But you can think of those 3 billboards that you're creating as, you know how sometimes when you're driving down the road and you see one billboard for McDonald's and it says something, then there's another billboard for McDonald's and it's like very similar, like it continues the message from the first billboard, and then the third billboard is for McDonald's also, and it tells you that the exit's right there to turn off. So you can think of the 3 billboards that you are designing as having a cohesive theme, like maybe they're going to be placed strategically going down the road of the highway leading up to your town. So think of it that way. Don't say it, show it. So get creative, avoid repetition, keep it simple, stupid. That is such a great thing to remember. The KISS method, I have to step back and say that to myself all the time. I'm like, simplify this. Just keep it simple. Be wary of logo size. Do the arm's length test. So make sure you're reading all of these things over, because these are the rules you want to keep in mind when you are designing your billboard this week. So our project requirements for this week is actually a 2-part submission. The first is going to be that finalized logo, just one on a 4x4 submitted as a PDF. And then you're going to submit 3 billboards as a multi-page PDF. And again, you can use Illustrator or Photoshop for this. If you want, if you're having trouble making a multi-page PDF in Illustrator or Photoshop, what you can do is you can place those billboards in InDesign and export the PDF that way. Sometimes it's a little bit easier. And these billboards have to be large. They're 22 by 6. So what you need to do is you're going to need to look for large images, and chances are good they're not going to be 300 DPI, which is fine, because I'm well aware of the restrictions when you are Googling images and using them on something that's 22 inches long by 6 inches high. However, do not use something and when you scale it, it is so pixelated, I can no longer tell what the image is. So those are the things to consider. You know, using a high quality image, clear hierarchy, simple eye-catching design. Think about your composition, think about your tagline, think of a cohesive theme. All right, so I am doing my, I finished my logo, so I'm gonna open up my logo, not this, from last week. And of the 3 logos we'll say that I have done, I'm going to use this one. So I'm gonna copy it out of here. And I'm gonna make a new 4x4, just one artboard. And I'm gonna place it. And I'm gonna make sure it's grouped. And this is what I'm going to do. I am going to just draw a square. Send it to the back. And I'm gonna align everything nice and neat to the square, and then I'll bring the square back down to the edges. There we go. And delete the square. Because I want this to be nice and centered in the middle of my 4x4 square. So I'm going to go back in to my assignment, and you'll notice it doesn't tell you how to name the assignment, but if you remember from last week, I posted an announcement how I want your assignments named. So you can go back into the assignment or the announcements. Correct naming conventions. It's from March 21st if you're looking for that announcement. And it's going to be week 2. So I'm going to save this. And here's my week 1. I'm going to go back in to my course. I'm going to navigate over to that folder that I created for week 2. I'm going to make a folder called assignments. Change that to week 2, assignment. S. McNamara. I'm going to save. I'm going to name actually week 2 assignment underscore logo, because you have 2 things that you need to submit. So just so that way they don't get confusing. I'm going to name it one logo and I'll name one billboard. I'm going to save it as an Illustrator file first, because I always want to have a native file. Then I'm going to do a file save as, and I'm just going to change it to that PDF. And the PDF is going to be what I submit. And I'll put them in the same folder. Before I upload it though, always want to make sure that I double check that PDF, make sure nothing fell off. Looks good. My nice little wave there. All right. And so that part 1 is now done. I made my changes to my logo. I've saved it as a PDF file. It's 4x4. It's just one artboard. That part is done. I need to do this part obviously first before I can use the logo on my billboard. So let's think about what I'm going to put on my billboard. And you might want to, create a doc file where you write up some ideas for your billboard, like for different headlines maybe that you're going to use. You need to come up with 3. So you should have 3 different headlines, but they should all be kind of somewhat related. And you need to think about your theme. Your theme is to bring in tourists to your town. So I'm going to use Microsoft Word. And I'm going to just make some notes. My theme, bring tourists to Westport, Mass. I'm going to think about what the town what does the town have to offer? Offers ocean, river, kayaking, beaches, obviously if there's ocean, and wooded trails, so that's hiking, and what's another thing? And you can go back to your keywords that you did in your mood board. This will help you to come up with these ideas of what your town has to offer. My last one will be seafood, I'm going to say. Really good seafood. All right, so then I need to come up with some headline ideas. Relax by the sea. I want it to be 6 words or less. How about check your email from the beach? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. All right, that one's a good one. Although who really wants to check their email? How about ditch your email? Ditch your email. Something at the beach. Ditch your email. Sit by the waves. I don't know, something that work on something like that. I'm gonna use actually ditch your email from the beach and hike away your concerns, because there's hiking. All right, so I've got a couple of ideas. I know what my theme is. Next one I need to do is I need to think about what I can use for images. So I'm going to have to Google some images. Here's the thing. If you live in the town that you are creating this logo and everything for, go out and take some pictures. Take some of your own pictures. If you have a good camera, take some of your own pictures and you can use those for your postcard and for your for your billboard. You know, get out there. If the weather's nice and you're in that town, I mean, you know, definitely source your own images. That would be great. However, I am going to use Google so I can show you how to find some good images and find them big enough, basically. So I'm going to do Westport, Mass, images, settings, or whoops, tools, size. I want to say large because I'm looking for the largest images. Usage rights. We're really only doing this for school, so you really don't need to do this per se, but you should probably check for labeled for reuse with modification because you get around copyright that way. So just something to consider. It's kind of interesting. That's Marblehead, it's not Westport. Horseneck Beach, that is in Westport. And if you know some actual places in town, you can Google like those specific places. Like Horseneck Beach is in Westport. Horseneck Beach. You know, try to stay away from anything that has a timestamp like that. You know, not the best, obviously. Large, I don't even, is that? Oh yeah, that is Westport. It's got some bags over here though. It's not that great of an image. What's this? Oh, this is Westport. That's pretty cool. Not that big. Not that big. So we've got a beach picture. I have this image. This might be good. And I'm just going to save the images that I find into my assignment folder, but I'm going to make a folder called art. I'll just put all of those images that I think are going to work in there. Let's see what else we've got. That's definitely not Westport. South Korea, that's not Westport. It'll help if I take off that knot. This is Westport. That is the river. That's pretty cool. It's not that big. You'll notice the ones that I picked are about like, you know, 1100 pixels by 800 pixels. You know, you really want to try to find like something like this one is, you know, 2200 pixels. That's really big. This one's great. This is a literal fork in the road that's in town. So I might want to use that one for something. Maybe for the postcard or something. Because you got to think about artwork for the postcard as well while you're looking. So you're going to want to find, you know, your images for your billboard and your images for your postcard and everything else. This is a good one. That's right down there at the river. That is not in Massachusetts. Another one. All right, so I've got a couple of good images there that I found. So my billboard needs to be 22 inches by 6 inches. So I'm going to use Photoshop for mine. So I'm going to create a new document. It's going to be custom. It's going to be, change that to inches. 22 inches by 6 inches. And my computer's going to be like, what? Yours probably will too. And this is where you might want to just do them one at a time instead of creating 3 artboards, because they're so big. It can be really taxing on your computer to try and create, 3 artboards going at the same exact time that are 22 inches by 6 inches. That's like 66 inches of artwork and layers and everything else going on. So you might want to do them one at a time and then place them into InDesign to make that PDF. You don't want to completely kill your computer, basically. All right, so if you remember from last week when you were putting together or coming up with your color scheme, we created an Adobe Color library. So that library should show up in Photoshop. Here's mine with your theme, so you can basically make sure that you can use those colors, also use your swatches and everything, but your color theme is right there. Get a little bit bigger. There we go. All right, so I'm going to do check your email from the beach, I guess. I'm gonna open up all of those pictures that I downloaded. Use this one. I like to do tile vertically, then I can just drop things from one screen to the other and close them out. And this is what I mean by you're not going to find an image that is going to, be 22 inches across. It's just probably not going to happen. However, when you scale it, just make sure that it's not pixelated. See how this isn't showing up pixelated? Like, I can still tell what's going on in this image. I'll show you what would happen if you picked an image that was pixelated. Let me find a smaller one. Like this. All right, here we go. So I'm going to copy this image and I'm going to put this and scale it the same exact way. So see how small this is? All right, so I'm going to start to scale this and make this 22 inches. Look at how pixelated that is. See how you can see all those dots? Like, and it's all the color, it's a mess when I've scaled it this big. This is way more crisper and clearer. So that's what you want to go for. Something like this. This is awful. Don't do this. Trash that. All right. I'm going to move because I'm going to be using it a lot. I'm going to actually go back into Illustrator and I'm going to open up that logo, my finalized logo. I'm going to put it in my library. So see how my library is already open here? I'm just going to copy and paste it, like literally drag it into my library because I'm going to be using it a lot. So that way I don't have to keep going into Illustrator. I'm going to go over. Here it is. Drag that in. And I can scale it. And I want to make sure it's going to stand out nice on the background of this image. And you can see it's starting to get a little bit lost on the blue. So I'm going to need to do something about that. I'm going to bring this a little bit down to get the trees out. The way. And I'm still going to put, some ad copy on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take out, and there's a couple of ways that you can do that, depending on the color. I'm going to see how it goes with my magic wand tool. I'm just going to select the sky and that clear background behind it. And I'm going to just feather this by 8 might work. And I'm going to delete it. There we go. And I'm going to add a new sky in the background. Because why not, right? I'm a designer, I can make a sky. So I'm probably going to use a gradient. So I'm going to go into my gradient tool. And I need something that's going to be a lot lighter than this blue right here. So I'm going to sample off of this blue. Whoops. There we go. I'm going to bring it up. Maybe right there. And second color is going to be white. It's just going to kind of fade to nothing. Change the opacity to 100. There we go. So that stands out. That's a lot easier to read once I've done that. Now my logo is standing out a little bit, but I want it to stand out a little bit more. So I might add just a very, very, very subtle drop shadow to my logo. See, because I don't want it to, the Massachusetts, it's way too much. So I'm going to change the opacity to about 20%. Change my distance to 6. Look, that's just subtle enough where it gives it a little bit of a pop off of the page. Just see how subtle that is, but it makes it stand out just a little bit more. And I need to add my headline that I've come up with. So what I want to do is I want to refer back to my mood board from week 1 because I came up with a whole bunch of fonts. And oops. And I want to go back and see, what some of my ideas were. I put all of this work into it. I might as well use some of these fonts. So let's open that up. And my idea for a headline was Xantroke, which we'll see how it works. I might change my mind because it might not work as well with my logo. But I can try. I'm going to just put this down here for a minute. I'll just leave that pink for a second. And we'll go back to my Word file. What did I come up with? I'm going to try Relax by the Sea. It's not very relaxing like that. And this isn't a very relaxing font. I wish I had something that had to do with dunes. So maybe I want to move that kind of up here. I want to change the font a bit. Let me go back in. I had some good, it's a good script right there. Maybe I'll try it in a script. That might be a little bit more relaxing. Relax by the Sea. Definitely needs some work. No. Oh my goodness. All right, come on. There we go. Relaxed by the sea. Maybe it's my image. It could be my image. You know, this dunes image is kind of eh. And if it's not working, you know, feel free to try something else. Like try another image. So let me see what else I have. Oh, I know what I can do. Hold on. I have an idea. Window, arrange. If you were wondering how I put them side by side, I go to window, arrange, tile all vertically, and then I just drop it in. Oh, that's tiny. It looked a lot bigger when I opened it. See how bad it looks. Yeah, that's way too low res. See, even when you try, sometimes it's low res. Larger than. Kayaking, Westport River. Or Westport River kayaking. This is actually in Fall River, so not even in Westport. That could work. My idea was to say, kayak your cares away. All right, let's try this image. Just gonna. See how big this is. And this is one of the things you're going to run into where you're just like, you know, I don't know. I need to make this work. These images are difficult. I didn't take them. No, I don't like that. Oh well. All right, I'm going to stick with by the sea because I want to make sure I get to the postcard as well. So I'm going to stick with relax by the sea. Obviously, I need to work on this a little bit. Maybe what I can do is go back to my original font. I have another idea. All these ideas. Might do. Let's see if I can kind of have them come up through the dunes or something. I have to break it up. Yeah. So I can start to like kind of mess around with it a little bit. Maybe just use my clone tool. Photoshop in a little bit. Whoops. That was my history. It was already open. Bring that tree line up a little. And bring it down a little over here. So you can kind of Photoshop a little bit, you know, some of your image, like try to get it to work for you. Anywhere where it might be a little too distracting. Be like the master of your own design. Bring that line up a bit. And down a little bit over here. So I can, you know, just kind of starting to think about how this might work together. I'm gonna put that as my headline in here. And maybe I want to bring down the opacity of this just a little bit. Even change the color. I had to do each word separately, as you can see. Bringing that back up. Ooh, maybe do the green. You know, and just kind of keep working with it until it feels right, you know, which is exactly what I would keep doing with this. You know, I don't feel like this is 100%, but I definitely want to move on to my to showing you the postcard. So I've got one of them down. I have my theme, I have my headline, I have my logo, I have my image. It's the right size. I'm going to double check it against the rest of the assignment. I'm going to make sure that my other two have the same cohesive theme as this one. I want something, it's kind of a simple eye-catching design. You know, somebody going by at 65 miles an hour will be able to see it. The image looks high quality, even though it's scaled a little bit bigger than it should be. It still looks high quality. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to save it as billboard 1 for myself. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into InDesign. I'm going to create a document that is 22 inches by 6 inches. It's going to be 3 pages. I don't want facing pages. And I don't need a bleed or anything. Hit OK. And I'm going to place each of my billboards on each page. So we'll say I have billboard 1. Let's pretend that I finished it. Billboard 2 and billboard 3. Obviously, you need to have 3 actual billboards. Then for this, I'm going to save this with the same naming convention that I saved the logo. I'm going to just name it billboard. InDesign. I'm going to do a file, PDF, high quality PDF, save it to the same folder, export, and close it out. And I'm going to double check my PDF again. So my PDF should be a 3-page PDF, which it is, but it's all the same billboard on each page. So I can submit this, my PDF for my billboard, and my PDF for my logo in my assignment together. Each is a submission. Now make sure that you're going over everything in the rubric. You just submit the assignment. You would just choose each file. First, I would put in my logo. Then I would add another file. Submit my billboard, and then just click. You can put a comment, you know, here's my finished logo, here's my 3 billboards, they're named appropriately, submit assignment. And that's what you would do. I want to leave that page. I'm not going to actually submit it. It'll take forever for it to upload. All right, so now we've got about 20 minutes left. Let's discuss the week 2 assessment, which is creating that postcard. So like I said, there is a template for you to download here of a 5x7 postcard, but I don't even think when you download the template, I don't even think it's 5x7. Let's take a look. But there's some problems with the template, and that's why I may do a new one. So you have the front side, which is 5x8, not 5x7. And you have the back side, which is actually the front side. So there, as you can see, this is clearly the front of your or this is clearly the front, this is clearly the back. This also does not match this. So there's just a lot of issues going on with this template. So the one that I have downloaded, it's only one side, but it's the correct size, and it's like this is only 72 DPI. It's 5x8. It's the wrong size. It's the wrong DPI. It's not CMYK. There's just a lot of problems with that. And then this one was 300 DPI, but still also 5x8. So the template that I have created for you, because you do need to do a two-sided postcard, is, where is it? There we go. It's 5x7, and I've marked out the safe zone for you. So don't, have any text running into here. And it's 330 DPI, exactly what you need it to be. So it's ready to go. When you are creating this, you can create side 1 and side 2. You can make a 2 artboard document if you want. It's really up to you. All you need to do for side 2, you'll notice, it's kind of half and half. This part right here is where, this half is where the postal information is going to go. So what you can do is you can just right click and copy this image, go over onto your template, paste it on, and scale it. Which this one's not the right size either. Like this, drop a guide, and then delete it out. And you'll be able to see like where you need to put, where you can design where the information, like putting the address and everything goes. So while you're working on it, what I would have you do is grab these 2 layers, put them in a folder, just select both of them and click on the folder and name this folder Safe Zone, because you can turn this on and off so you can see where your safe zone is, and then make a new layer and call this your working layer, and you can start to create your postcard. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create side 1. Again, my images are going to be so much easier to use on the postcard because they don't have to be 22 inches. So I can go back to those images that I sourced in my assignment. And I'm going to pick the kayaking one because that was the one I really wanted to use. Still a little small, but that's all right. And I'm going to just lighten this up a little. Must have been a very cloudy day when they took this picture. All right. And this is going to seem crazy, but I'm going to move this up a bit. And I'm going to go into Illustrator. I'm going to do one of my favorite things. 7 by 5. There we go. Draw a box. Take off the border. Come on. No border. I hate how everything in Illustrator defaults to have a border. It kind of does that in Photoshop or in Illustrator in design too. All right, so I've got my box, window, effect, orb, flag. Not that much. Make myself a little wave. Just drag that into my library. There we go. Into Photoshop. My library go. There we go. Here's my wave. Drag it in. And maybe give it a little drop shadow. Change the direction and there we go. I can grab my logo. There. I need my wave to be a little bit of a different color. Nope. There, sample it from over here. I hate how the color library works in Photoshop. It works so much better, honestly, when of all the programs in Dreamweaver. for some reason. Like, you know, you wouldn't expect that, but it actually does. Oh, I gotta change that to 100%. There we go. All right. And I want this to stand out a little bit more, maybe. No. Whoops. Make a copy of this. This is gonna seem a little weird. This one's gonna be white. This one's going to be 60%. All right, maybe even smaller. Really want that logo to stand out. And again, I'm gonna come up with, you know, a little bit of a tagline, something that's just gonna stick out. So maybe kayak your cares away. Not in that font. There we go. There we go. I know it's boring to watch somebody design. I completely get that. But, you know, I want to make sure that you're kind of seeing my process of doing things. Staying within my safe zone. Clearly this is running right on top of my logo. That's fine. It's my logo. Rename that. My logo over here. Extend that wave a little. And give it a little bit. More breathing room. And again, you know, just keep working with it, keep working with my design. So here's my front of my postcard for right now. So I'm going to save this as week 2, make a folder. I'm going to call it assessment. And naming convention should be similar to the assessment for week 1. Just change it to week 2. I'm going to put an F for front. And what I can do is when I'm making the back, what I might just do a file save as first and change the F to a B, name it back. And I can take out the things that I'm not going to be using in the back layer. Whoops, definitely using the logo. I'll keep kayak your cares away. I'm going to turn my safe zone on for a second. Turn that off. All right. So here is the section where the address and everything is going to go. So I'm going to just fill that real quick with gray so I can see where I need to stay out of. And again, I want to give myself a little bit of breathing room, so I might even drop like another ruler right here. Move the logo up over here. I'm gonna have to close it a bit. And make sure when you're scaling things, you're holding down the shift key or you're locking it so they scale proportionately. And this is a good time to have a little bit of body copy. So I'm going to go back into my mood board. See what I had for an idea for body copy. A beezy. All right, I kind of like that. Draw myself a little text box. Left. change my font to like 90% black, honestly, because that's a good, it's a good color. Probably 16 point type. All right. And change my font. BZ, regular, not italic. There we go. Come and visit beautiful Westport, Massachusetts. Our rivers, our whatever, yada, 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 like here's my text. But you would actually write out some actual ad copy. And you can even continue your headline from the first side, you know, down at the bottom. So let's say I've got, you know, maybe 3 little paragraphs of text right here. There we go. So we've got side 2, and I'm going to turn off that gray area. I might even, at this point, maybe change it to white so I can see where the address would go. Color overlay. And save that. Remember, save your backside as a B. And once you have them both finished, oops, wrong folder. So I got B and F. Save your PSD files, because if you need to make changes, you can only make changes to the PSD file. If you save it as a JPEG, you're not going to be able to make those changes. So after you have saved it as a PSD file, then do a save as, change it to a JPEG, and file, save as, change it to a JPEG. My tip to remember that you have it saved as a PSD file is once you have finished your postcard, the PSD file, save it and close it out completely, then open it up and save it as a JPEG. That way you don't accidentally, you know, do it the wrong way, and you can double check. So I've got a front, I've got a back. Honestly, if I was done with this, I would change where the logo goes. Like I would probably scale my logo back to meet up on this line, so it's nice and neat. But I was doing this quick to show you how to put together a very quick, in 10 minutes, postcard. But you know, these are the things you want to look at before you submit it. So I would go back in, open this up, I would drop a line, I would want to make sure that those line up, go to my logo, and either move my logo, yeah, I'd probably move my logo over rather than scale it, and save it again, close it, because that's what I mean, close it, and then open it up. Oops, wrong one. And file, save as, and save the JPEG again. Just so that way I know that I'm not accidentally saving my changes as only a JPEG, not as a PSD file. And double check. That looks neater now. And the back side. But you'll actually need to write some ad copy for your side. So I would double check this against my rubric. make sure I'm posting on time. Are all of my design elements there? Have I, is it 5x7? Is it full color CMYK? Is it 330 DPI? And if you wanted to save it as a PDF, you can save it as a PDF. And you can do the same thing that way that you did as a billboard. You can just save your PSD file, create a 2-page 5x7 in InDesign. I'll do that real quick because we have like 2 minutes. You could create a 2-page 5x7 in InDesign. Oops, or 7x5, I should say. No, don't say 7x5. 2 pages, not facing. There we go. And I can place those PSD files on the front on page 1, the back on page 2, save it. As just the assessment. I don't even need front or back. And do a file Adobe PDF export. And again, double check that PDF before you submit it. Perfect.